Kosmala ora flate, to esi rom toliefro e perse, Polum dan propom ignastea, kai non erno. Pola hogen panto patenalgea, hom tata umo. Ar numenos in te psuke, kai noston detail. Ton hamothenge thea, ugater dios, e pe, kai hemi. Speak, memory, of the cunning hero, the wanderer, blown off course time and again. Speak of all the cities he saw, the minds he knew, the suffering deep in his heart at sea as he struggled to bring his men home. Of these things speak, immortal one, and tell the tale again, once more, in our time.
He never minded if I asked him the same question 10 times just to make sure, or had unrealistic expectations about how many classes I could take in one semester. From making fun of my pursuit of a career in busyness to conversations about the great books, every chat with him left me better in some way. He would always say that we read great books so that when we are old and gray, we can have an interesting conversation with ourselves.
He challenged me to take honors courses from the luminaries of the university, including one of his own seminars on the Platonic dialogues, and to try harder, damn it. He was relentlessly demanding in the way he pushed me and the first-year students in our class to defend and refine our ideas. He told me he liked to view himself as the goalkeeper of truth, that it was the student's job to take shots at an argument, and his job to knock that crap out, unless they could drive the point home.
My first interaction with him was during my oral exam. Being a born and raised Texan, I didn't feel the need to argue with anyone, so most of my responses to his questions were, "Yes, sir." Eventually, he became exasperated with my lack of willingness to engage, so he leaned over his desk toward me and spoke very firmly. "Stop being so damn deferential." He made stories come to life. Watching him explain Agamemnon was like watching a one-man show that included every curse word in the dictionary. Our conversations would be completely random. I once asked him if he would ever run in politics, and he said he had considered it because his slogan would be, "Vote for Andy. He stands for the little people."
He could be tough at times with his feedback and advice, but that's why he was the best at what he did. He wouldn't filter out his opinions to make you feel better. Rather, he approached advising and work, as all of us should, with a nurturing but stern tone that proved his commitment to the college and its students would build a positive legacy for the campus. He was genuine and honest, and it showed. He could lure you into some innocuous conversation about the best kind of barbecue sauce, only to take you on a journey through the most minute of minutia in the background of one of Aristophanes' plays. He'd leave you bewildered, smarter, and absolutely convinced that something incredible had just been unearthed from a millennia-old play, treatise, or history.
He started talking about human sin. I'll never forget his speech on choosing the alpha or omega section. With a great pride, he said, at 11 a.m., the tall, beautiful, virtuous alpha students will come and have their lecture until 12 p.m. And with great reluctance, he said, then the less tall, less beautiful, brutal omega students will have their lecture. Throughout the day, he'd talk to us about anything. He could talk about food, movies, television, music, philosophy, his stories, or even corny jokes he remembered from years ago. A couple of times, he came into the college before anyone, just so he could make breakfast for everyone. And his breakfasts, like everything he cooked, were amazing.
Good afternoon and welcome to this ongoing celebration of the life of Andy Little. My name is Bill Monroe and speaking for the entire honors family, I want to say how happy we are to see so many old friends and colleagues, many from far and wide. Thank you all for coming. And now that we have moved into a more familiar presentational format, it is appropriate to acknowledge a few of those who made this day possible. The format of the Voices of Tribute portion of our program was conceived by Dr. Estes. Brenda Cruz-Wolf built the beautiful slideshow from pictures donated by many of you. And the overall celebration was put together by, first and foremost, Brenda Roden, with lots of help from Sarah Bojani, Mallory Chesser, Rita Soria, Alice Yang, and Martha Hayes. Mike Barnes invoked the Muse, as you heard, and Sarah, Gabby, Caitlin, Stacy, and Megan, the Voices of Tribute, spoke just a few of the loving, celebratory words that were posted on the Honors Facebook page. Now we move to the more expository part of our program, which includes words, music, and the infamous Headmaster video. Edited, I am told, so as not to be NSFW, but SSFW, semi-safe for work. Without further ado then, let's let the show run, with those of us who are giving remarks doing brief self-introductions. David.
Hi everybody, my name is David Tucker. I live in Minneapolis and I work at the University of Minnesota, and like a lot of you, I was a student and friend of Andy's for many years. Like most of you, like all of you, I was devastated to hear of his passing. When I came to the Honors College in the fall of 2007, I was not a traditional student. I had dropped out of high school and started Rice when I was 16, and quickly dropped out of that after 2 semesters. I came to the Honors College in my, don't want to age myself too much, in my mid to late 20s. and had a career in the wine business here in Houston. I went to college because I thought I needed a degree to bolster my experience. And the professor in the psych department, who was a good client of mine, said, oh, you should do the Honors College. You should look into that. And so I applied to the Honors College and was put in a class called Human Situation. And it's here that I met Andy for the first time. That fall in antiquity, we read the Odyssey. We read Euripides' Iphigenia at Aulis. We read Aristophanes' Lysistrata, Plato's Gorgias, Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War, Epictetus, Tacitus, and the Book of Job. I immediately changed my major from business to political science, and Andy was the driving force behind that. So when Brenda Roden approached me about Andy's memorial, she asked me to perhaps think of something to read, a piece of text that Andy loved and that connected us. And I could tell a story about, and I knew immediately that it had to be Thucydides. It had to be his History of the Peloponnesian War. Looking back through my notes, on September 7th of 2007, Andy gave his first lecture in the Human Situation, Antiquity, Team Omega, on Thucydides' History of the Peloponnesian War. We started that semester with the Odyssey, so Thucydides was an abrupt change of pace. I pieced together some of my lecture notes from his lectures on Thucydides, and I'll just read you the summary. Andy argued that if Herodotus is considered the father of Western history, then Thucydides is the first scientific historian and the first political realist. Thucydides eschewed myths for fact. Thucydides hated poets, and his writing was aggressively unpoetic. And he pointed out that there are 8 separate attacks on poets in the archaeology alone. And Thucydides claims his aim is to free us from the exaggeration of events as done by poets and demagogues. Thucydides despised hope, which was not considered a virtue by the Greeks. He was not interested in love at all, except that he mentions love in the Mytilenean debate when he says that, quote, hope and passionate desire and eros hold the greatest sway over men's hearts. To be clear, this was not a good thing for Thucydides. Most of the dialogues in Thucydides seem to end with either the Athenians or Spartans attacking a city, slaughtering all of the men, and selling the women and children into slavery. When Andy lectured on Thucydides, he radiated pure joy. This was amazing to me. All I could get out of this text was that it's better to kill than to be killed, and here was this guy reading the Plataean debate and giggling at the board with happiness. I felt completely out of depth in those first lectures. But Andy loved this text. And so it was that even though he wasn't my human situation leader or my advisor or anything else, we had a series of conversations about it that led to us being fast friends. It started with me approaching him after lecture and walking back to the Honors College with him and bugging him to explain something, and sometimes buying a smoke. To hours spent in his office going over lectures and going over the language and the different puns Thucydides used. Because Andy thought that Thucydides was much funnier than people gave him credit for, and everyone would just understand that if they spoke more Greek. That progressed to us getting drinks together once every couple weeks to talk about Thucydides and the other books we were reading. So when he came to me in the spring of 2008 and said, David, we're planning a study abroad trip to Italy this summer. It's going to be incredible. We're going to go to Sicily. We can reread Thucydides together. It's going to be amazing. Even though it was expensive, and I'd have to take time off work, and I had never been overseas before, etc., I knew I had to go. Unless you thought, as I did, that he was kidding about reading Thucydides, when I got to the airport, IAH, to get on the plane, he gave me a copy of the landmark Thucydides. We read a smaller, abridged version of Thucydides in Human Sit. He gave me this copy so we would be on the same page, translation-wise, in Italy. I still have it. Some of the pages he had pre-annotated for me. This was great, I suppose, because I had not packed any Thucydides for my Italian vacation. We went on this trip, we had a great time. We saw the ancient sites. We took a trip one day to the salt mines where the Athenian prisoners were kept for 70 days after their final defeat at the hands of Gylippus and the Syracusans. And Andy's excitement was infectious, so much that our guides did not know what to do with this. The night we left, the night before we left, he came to my room after dinner, and he had a bottle of scotch and his landmark Thucydides, and he said, I know you bought Cuban cigars. Go get them and bring your Thucydides. And we went down to the Great Harbor, and it was a cold night, it was not warm. And we went down to the Great Harbor, and we sat there, and we read the account of the failed Sicilian expedition, taking turns with the paragraphs, reading them out loud with our feet, well, his feet in the water. I'm sure people thought we were insane. But it was one of the best nights of my life. It really sums up everything I loved about Andy. So I'm going to read to you a paragraph, or 2 paragraphs, from this terrible passage, which is the last passage of, it's the ending of book 7 of the Sicilian expedition that we read together all those years ago. The prisoners in the quarries were at first harshly treated by the Syracusans, crowded in a narrow hole, without any roof to cover them. The heat of the sun and the stifling closeness of the air tormented them during the day, and then the nights, which came on autumnal and chilly, made them ill by the violence of the change. Besides, as they had to do everything in the same place for want of room, and the bodies of those who died from their wounds or from the variation in the temperature, or from similar causes, were left heaped together one upon another, intolerable stenches arose, while hunger and thirst never ceased to afflict them, each man during 8 months having only half a pint of water and a pint of grain given him daily. In short, no single suffering to be apprehended by men thrust into such a place was spared them. For some 70 days they lived thus all together, after which all, except the Athenians and any Sicilians or Italians who had joined in the expedition, were sold. The total number of prisoners taken, it would be difficult to state exactly, but it could not have been less than 7,000. This was the greatest Hellenic achievement of any in this war, or in my opinion, in Hellenic history. At once most glorious to the victors and most calamitous to the conquered. They were beaten at all points and all together. All they suffered was great. They were destroyed, as the saying is, with total destruction. Their fleet, their army, everything was destroyed, and few out of many returned home. Such were the events in Sicily. Andy's love of the text reflected his love of community. For me, Andy's greatest legacies are rooted in his fundamental commitment to the honors community and his absolute commitment to the equality of intellect. He had an almost unlimited willingness to engage with anyone on any topic, and he never shied away from good food, a good drink, or a good beverage. So I'm really happy to see you all here today. To echo what Bill said, from everyone who was his friend, thanks so much for coming. After the program, when we retire to the Honors Commons, in honor of Andy, I hope everyone will grab a glass and grab something to eat and have interesting conversations with one another. I think it's what he would have wanted. Cheers.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christine Wish, and I am a PhD candidate right now in musicology at Indiana University. I graduated from honors in 2010. Andy was my instructor for Human Situation when I joined Team Omega for Modernity in spring 2007. To say I was initially intimidated and bewildered in his class may be an understatement. It's quite the understatement, really. He was naturally brilliant, engaging, inquisitive, and relentless in making us question ourselves and our thinking. I've never to this day had a professor who enjoyed playing the devil's advocate as much as Andy did. He would get this little glint in his eye and this impish half-open smile. The minute you said something, he could be like, no, really? Really? Like others in this room, I still have every paper he ever handed back in class, including one that I now reference in my own classroom when I work with students on their writing. The paper was a response to King Lear. It was pretty terrible too, my response. And so, Andy had survived the first page of my writing, but by page 2, he had clearly given up trying to ascertain whatever weak thesis may have been hiding in my text. And so, scribbling in the margins of my paper, he wrote, as only he could, "Where are we going from here? And where do we intend to go from here? You are taking me for a ride, blindfolded, and I'm a nervous passenger." I passed. To be honest, looking back on that paper, I'm not sure I could answer where I was going. But those comments have stuck with me, and while my writing may not have always been the clearest, fortunately a new crop of students have now benefited from my narrative hostage situation and his feedback. So following Human Situation, I got to know Andy through my work with the Honors Ambassadors, as well as the 2008 study abroad course to Italy that David spoke of. I knew Andy primarily as a calculated planner, but during the trip to Italy, I got to see a spontaneous and fun side of him that I didn't really know before. As I recall, on our final night, which I'm going to pick up basically where David left off, out of the blue, presumably I guess this is after you had the Thucydides moment, he said something that was just uncharacteristically impulsive. "Why not realize this is a very selective audience, and can say they've seen the sunrise over the Mediterranean. When would this chance come again? Unfortunately, the early morning hours were cold, at least by Houston standards. We had packed light coats, but we were not really prepared to sit in the breezy, cool, 40-ish degree dark weather. The solution? Obviously, as you saw in one of the pictures, it was to take the hotel blankets and wrap ourselves in them. This was, as I recall, and David has now confirmed, Andy's suggestion, which is why I went along with it. Because if you knew me, and still know me, I'm not the spontaneous type nor the rule breaker, but if my teacher said it was okay, sure. So why not walk around in a foreign city wrapped up in a stolen hotel blanket? What could possibly go wrong? So, half an hour before sunrise, we processed from the hotel, wrapped in our blankets, through the town, to the sea. Small group of college students and their leader, bundled up like little burritos in cheap fleece blankets, getting the strangest look from the few people who were mostly fishmongers at that ungodly hour. And once at the edge of the sea, we sat, waiting for sunrise. I don't remember what anyone said or if anyone was even talking in those moments of twilight. I don't think so. But I won't ever forget the experience and the feeling of awe when the sun finally peeked over the horizon. And I thank Andy for sharing that incredibly sublime moment with us. So when I was asked to speak at today's event, I was also asked if I could play a musical tribute. Okay, well, I'm not the violinist I was 10 years ago. I will never forget Andy as an incredible karaoke singer, belting out Wild Horses in a dive bar in Italy. We all know this musical side of him, so how can I say no to this? Of course I have to do music. But Wild Horses is not a good piece for violin. Besides, I hear there's a karaoke machine, rumor has it. So I reached farther back, and the whole idea is to connect with the Honors College. I was like, let me honor him with a piece that was inspired by antiquity, and also one that is appropriately cathartic. In 1762, the Austro-German composer Christoph Gluck wrote the music for the opera Orfeo et Eurydice. The legend of Orpheus comes to us in multiple sources, including works by Ovid and Virgil, and served as inspiration for librettists and composers due to the powerful role music plays in the legend. Orpheus uses his lyre and the power of song to appeal to the Furies and allow him to bring his wife, Eurydice, back from the underworld. In Gluck's setting of the legend, following the successful appeal to the Furies, Orpheus is offered a view of the afterlife. The view is of Elysium, a realm where the chosen, the righteous, the heroic live a blessed and happy life after death. Set as a ballet, this scene is now known as the Dance of the Blessed Spirits. The music for the scene is not happy, as we are accustomed to hearing in Western classical music. Besides, we know he didn't like the happy love, like, no, that's too much. So, thought this was appropriate. Look how designed this piece to reach beyond the earthly pleasure and to express the truly sublime and the ineffable. A little bit like a nice spin on my writing, that was a different type of ineffable. So I can thus think of no other piece that is so fitting for this occasion. This is the Dance of the Blessed Spirits from Gluck's Orfeo and Eurydice for Andy.
I was crying a little bit as I was writing this, so I was trying to read to make it easier so I don't cry. Hello everyone, my name is Noriel Campos, and I was a student of Andy's and of Dr. Ross Lence. So I hope you don't mind, and I don't think Andy would if I talk about Dr. Lence as well as Andy as well today. I arrived at Honors College at the University of Houston in the fall of 1998, a child. And these two great men became my idols. And my guardians, whether they liked it or not. They're part of what memories define my time here, going back over 20 years. Excuse me. As you all know, each of them had enough wit, memory, irreverence, and energy to fill a hall. And I decided in my sophomore year that I wasn't going to wouldn't major in philosophy, I wouldn't major in history, but I'd be part of the Honors College, I'd be a Cougar, go Cougs, and more than anything, I was going to graduate with a Lence and little degree. Well, I know I'm far from the only student or person that felt this way for both of these great men. I had never met anyone like them and never have since then. I'm 39 now. They were the two most brilliant people I've ever met. My major was political science, and I minored in Latin. So unfortunately I wasn't able to attend Lence dinner last night, but I'm happy to be here to celebrate Andy today. Thank you to everyone who contributed to this afternoon, especially Brenda, for giving me this opportunity to pay interest on a debt I'll never be able to repay. I could go on forever about these two singular men on a variety of topics, but what I hope to contribute today is one example of myself, excuse me, of how impactful they were, and also a little bit about their connection to each other. Quick story about Dr. Lence. When he passed away in 2006, it crushed me. I was living in Washington, D.C. at the time, and I wouldn't have been there had it not been for him. In my last semester at U of H, I applied to a learning intern summer program in D.C., where I would take a couple courses at Georgetown. Thank you. Where I would take a couple courses at Georgetown, one on political systems and the other in comparative economics, and also intern with the International Labor Organization. I was awarded a scholarship to attend, but after calculations, I figured I needed about $1,500, and I needed to raise that in a month or two, or I wouldn't have been able to attend. So one of those days, where I had some time on a relaxed, humid Houston afternoon, I decided to go and visit with Dr. Lence. We chatted, and he told me a story of a neighbor of his to whom he would lend a hand in times of need. He mentioned to me how she would often repeat the phrase, the Lord provides, when these times of need were bridged over. After a bit, he then asked me how I was doing, and I told him about this program that I wanted to do in DC, and I wasn't sure how I was going to come up with that amount of money. As Dr. Lence began typing on his computer, I felt that it was time to let him get back to the more important responsibilities than my own small problems. So I thanked him and bid him my goodbyes. He bid me farewell, then he grabbed a sheet of paper that just came out of the printer and handed it to me. There was only one sentence, and it read, "Please issue Mr. Noriel Campos a check for $1,500 from the Ross Lence Endowment. The Lord provides." While I was in DC 3 years later, I found out he passed away. Again, I was crushed. This man had been a father and a grandfather to me, and he was gone. And I remember it was only after a conversation with Dr. Estes that I came to terms with that loss. I had many times with Dr. Lence laughed and cried, and I did that with Dr. Estes that day, and it was great. So, Andy Little. We used to play chess together sometimes. I started playing in the 4th grade, my gifted and talented program. I was pretty good then, loved it, but I never really got much better than 4th grade chess. It was a great way, however, to spend time with him and hear him talk and philosophize. He was also my academic advisor, and I took every class that he ever taught while I was here. He was an older brother and a father to me. I remember when he first told me he'd be having a child, and his child would be a boy. And I asked him what his son's name would be, and he told me, Jacob, the usurper, the heel grabber. And I'll always remember that conversation and that moment. He was proud, and he always was. He often kept me updated as his son grew up to be a teenager. It's beautiful to see you. And I love your name. I miss Andy, I miss Dr. Lence. They were Plato and Socrates to me. They were fearless, and I love them. I hope they know, I hope they knew how much they meant to me. And although I can't help but wish I could still visit with them and be enthralled and hang on every one of their words, I celebrate that I was ever lucky enough to have found them. They taught me about books, about great books, about respect, questioning, analyzing, about the lion, the fox, about the Thucydides, Machiavelli, Socrates, Plato, about the Bible, about Henry VIII, about accountability. Their minds were insatiable. They were fires, both of them. Troublemakers, gadflies. I wanted to be just like them, and I still do. They both had a funny way of asking questions, answering in 3 different ways, and then pretty much saying, who knows? And he would always say, however that may be. I owe both these men a great debt. Dr. Lence, for being like a father to me, a grandfather, I love you. Andy, for being an older brother, a father, and for mentoring me as you were once mentored by Dr. Lence. One day I hope to fulfill my obligation to do the same. You're both immortal, and your spirits live on in everyone here, and I know in many people not here. Thank you, everyone.
And now for something completely different. My name is Blair Alt. I am a 2010 honors alum. I am a former high school teacher of more subjects than I actually taught years of school. So English, theater, computer science. Little would make fun of me now if he heard that. But I am now a current student of the University of Washington in the Information Science Master's Program. And when I first heard that we lost our Professor Little, I reflected back to when I first realized Andy was not just my advisor or professor, but a friend. He had taken note that I was always in the college for some function or another and started to refer to me as the ubiquitous Blair Alt. To which I finally came up with a reply, "Are you sure you don't mean omnipotent?" This began our long-standing game of creating puns with our names in them. His was easy. I often joked that he shouldn't belittle me in our conversations, to which he would ponder what else was he supposed to be. The Honors College says it has an open door policy, but I think I may have abused it when it came to Little. Maybe all the professors, actually. I remember sitting in that chair right next to the full bookshelf for 20 to 40 minutes, at least once a week, if not more, in grueling to humorous discussions about whatever text he was reading or that I should be reading, what the state of his bookshelves at home were like. He had pictures of carpentry projects, but most of all, whatever new life issue I had encountered. My transition into adulthood was pretty hectic, and not just the counsel of many of the Honors College faculty, but definitely Little, He was there for me in some of my toughest moments, and that is what will stand out to me, that the Honors College is not just a place of learning, it is a place where character is built through the relationships you have with others. For many, I'm sure their stories and experiences with Little were similar and perhaps ended there. But I also got the chance to travel with Little to this honors study abroad to Israel. And in the back of that tour bus, towards the end of the trip, I realized I didn't just know Andy as a professor and advisor and a friend, I now knew him as a fellow creative soul bursting to express himself. Perhaps it was because on the trip, Dr. Monroe had employed me to come up with some song and dance number to sing in one of the open-air theaters. And I guess other students had chosen opera or recited Shakespeare or did something classical, but I went with something not traditional. We and a couple of peers, I think Andy Hall, I think you were in that, we sang Blackstrap Molasses. Which is this like Jimmy, it's an old tune, and it sounds even better in an open air theater in the middle of, I can't remember if that was Jordan or Israel, but there you go. That's why you're here. Okay. Perhaps it was because I'm almost always game for someone to burst out in a song or to make up ridiculous games on the spot, but Little started to appreciate my weirder side. Side note, he did not appreciate when I came into his office and asked if I could do like an internship credit with the Renaissance Festival for college credit. He had no idea what academic value working at the Renaissance Festival would have, but he definitely took me up on those tickets. So he started to appreciate my weirder side, and I believe it was then when the scheme to create the honors prank that would later happen that year, where he started to see that I should be involved in this prank. And that's what we're about to see. We're going to see the headmaster video. This was something that would simultaneously indoctrinate incoming honor students into the oddities of their soon-to-be faculty, and also allow Andy to live his dream of being a pink-haired rock star. And as many have mentioned, if you didn't know Andy Little liked karaoke, you were not paying attention. I like to karaoke myself, and I find that most people who truly love the craft of teaching have a little bit of a rock star in them, waiting to be given a microphone and a spotlight. Thanks, Brenda. Andy could dominate a stage with not just his voice, but his complete presence and commitment to the performance. The level of passion he had about Shakespeare was perhaps only toppled by the gusto in which he could perform Counting Crows. I was going to pull a little bit of a David Tucker and share some of my favorite parts of King Lear, mostly because it was Little who clued me into some of the heavier themes and got me to stop being such a Hamlet hipster, as he once accurately referred to me as. But I am going to pull Little and go completely off track, if that's all right with all of you. What I have to share with you now is the product of the creative collaboration for the 2010 Honors Retreat. You will see some other familiar faces and the influence of Dr. Shattuck, Dr. LeBeau, Dr. Long, and of course my major me, see I'm the mini me, she's my major me, Jodie Kosegi, present in each of their characters. The premise is that the band headmaster is being interviewed in a behind-the-music style show to give context to a song that these band members actually performed at the retreat, Mull Over the Changes. As Dr. Monroe mentioned, it has been slightly edited for time and content, although you can totally see me for the director's cut link afterwards. This will work best if you imagine yourself to be a freshman who has no idea what their relationships with faculty will look like. And then this plays. Oh no. I just pulled a glare. Oh no. Yes.
have to dump public truth in the darkness of pain and process. But ultimately, we decided that we wanted the album to be optimistic, so we went with REM Speedwagon because, you know, it's a classic and good education is really.
Okay, I've been asked to go back so you can hear all of the... Let's do it again! Also, if you're wondering what my role in this was, it was mostly just filming and giving Andy feedback about maybe not, or more of that. So if you hear me giggling in the background, I'm not apologizing for that.
My name is I'm an honors alum, class of 2010. I had the privilege of knowing Andy for 12 short years as my teacher, as my friend, and my colleague. In the picture of Dorian Gray, Oscar Wilde wrote, "Words, mere words, how terrible they were, how clear and vivid and cruel. One cannot escape from them. And yet what a subtle magic there was in them. They seemed to be able to give a plastic form to formless things, and to have music their own, as sweet as that of viol or a flute. Mere words. Was there anything so real as words?" I love this quote, but it also conveys for me Andy's love of the written word and of great books. In this instance, however, I find words quite insufficient. How do you encapsulate Andy? Andy, who was so integrally involved in the life of the Honors College, from helping students enroll at orientations, to teaching in the human situation sequence and upper level courses, to leading numerous reading groups, to helping lead study abroad and study away programs, to advising and helping thousands of students graduate over the years. He was a constant learner, and he dedicated his life to reading great books, understanding them, connecting themes and ideas, and to teaching what he had learned to everyone and anyone he met. Advising appointments, random meetings in the hallway, greetings in SSO, really any interaction, turned into a scholarly discussion. What an incredible love of learning and reading he had. Andy also loved to talk about food, and movies, and TV, and music. And his shock when he met a student who hadn't heard a particular song that they really should know was quite dramatic. When he didn't believe you if you told him you didn't know the song, he would start to recite the lyrics because that would help you to remember. Occasionally he might sing the lyrics to help you remember. When you still didn't recognize the song, he'd make you look it up and listen to it. I first met Andy in the fall of 2006 when I was a relatively quiet and shy incoming honors student. To say he was intimidating was a bit of an understatement, as Christine mentioned earlier. He talked faster than I do while he was talking about texts by Homer or Plato or Shakespeare or Thucydides. And he had an intensity and a fervor and intelligence that I had not seen before nor since. Andy had a lot to say about these texts, and our discussion sections frequently felt like second lectures. It was obvious that he had spent much time reading and rereading these texts. I was very amused when one day I came into his office and Andy was on his computer and he was talking about how he had electronic copies of certain texts. And that was great because he could perform a find to find a particular word or phrase and see in which context it appeared. And then he could go back to the original translation, of course, and see how that impacted the meaning of the text and how it would change in the various instances. He especially relished finding clever strings of words or a good play on words. One of my most vivid memories from Human Situation was during modernity in the spring. We were in between texts. We didn't have anything new to read for our discussion section, so Andy came into class that day very excited.
about the opportunity to read something else, and he brought printed copies, which of course I still have, of Edgar Allan Poe's A Cask of Amontillado. We read it together and spent the time discussing the short story. Andy would read, pause to offer commentary, and then continue. I can still hear his voice reading. The 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had borne as I best could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. You, who so well know the nature of my soul, will not suppose, however, that I gave utterance to a threat. At length, I would be avenged. This was a point definitively settled, but the very definitiveness with which it was resolved precluded the idea of risk. I must not only punish, but punish with impunity. A wrong is unredressed when retribution overtakes its redresser. It is equally unredressed when retribution overtakes, when the avenger fails to make himself felt as such to him who has done the wrong. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my wont, to smile in his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his immolation. And Brown was such an interesting person. About a year after I finished human situation, I began working in the student services office as student staff. And it was then, I think, that Andy realized that I was not quiet at all, and frequently had a lot of sass to give. We worked together to prepare the orientations for incoming students. I was tasked with making copies on colored paper of the various handouts. Being who I am, I selected salmon, fuchsia, red, pink, lime green, forest green, sea green, which we can all agree are different colors. When I brought the copies to Andy, he was not pleased, and he couldn't tell the colors apart. He asked me, why did you choose the shades of red and green as your color palette for the orientation packets? It turns out that Andy was red-green colorblind, and he couldn't tell the difference between any of the colors that I had selected. So in order to know the difference between the colors, he had to make a key that he kept all summer that told him what color each packet was on, so that when he referred to them during the orientation, he would be saying the right color with the right packet. I found this amusing. Andy did not. When I got to grad school, I emailed Andy to let him know that my grad school professors were impressed with my writing skills. I knew that most of the credit for that should come back to Andy, who would return essays covered in comments, questions, frustration, disbelief, very rarely praise. As a teacher myself now, I marvel that Andy made time to give that level of feedback on our essays. But Andy didn't reply to this email at all. And many years later, I reminded him of that. He found it all funny that I remembered these details. And I think it was because Andy didn't do any of what he did for the credit, but because he believed in it. He believed people should spend time reading the great books. People should be careful, thoughtful writers. And his job as our teacher was to make sure that we did. When I came back to honors in 2015, Andy was still there, sitting in the same office he had occupied when I was a student. Still had the same piles of papers everywhere. Still sitting in the same brown chair drinking copious amounts of coffee, hunched over his computer, pulling data and grading essays. I worked with Andy for 3 years as a fellow academic advisor. I hadn't realized how much I learned from him until in the weeks and months following his death. I had a hard time advising any students without directly quoting him or sharing something that he taught me. I often joke that he took the undergraduate catalog to be analogous to the Constitution of the United States of America. So many times I would walk into his office with a question about requirements, and he would respond to my question with a simple question. What does the catalog say?
Thank you, Andy.
Yes. Before I could answer, he would have turned to his computer screen, pulled up the catalog, and started to read to me the relevant section. His commitment to student success and his availability to students was incredible. Even when students walked in without an appointment, he would meet with them, much to the chagrin of the student staff, whose job it was to turn away students who didn't have an appointment. So many times as advisors, we have to answer the same questions over and over for different students. It's hard to maintain the same enthusiasm. But Andy's greatest strength as an advisor was his ability to connect with the students he met with, to remember their goals, to respect them and make them feel heard with consistent enthusiasm. I experienced that for myself as a student and witnessed it so many times as a colleague. And somehow Andy did all of that with his biting sense of humor. He would stand outside of his office with this walk-in student and tease them about how important they were that they could just show up without an appointment. I remember him taunting me that Betty Crocker was a chemist, so it wasn't a worthwhile pursuit of mine to study biochemistry. He also regularly told pre-med students that they aspired to work in a disease warehouse. And law students that they were aspiring pirates. Students who showed up to class, or a workshop, or an orientation without a writing utensil would get a deadpan question of, "Did you think you were going to a pool party?" We had so much fun working together with the rest of the advising team. We would laugh, discuss current events, personal struggles or triumphs, our goals, upcoming events and projects, all as a close-knit family. Andy's loss left a gaping hole, not just in the advising team, but in the whole of the Honors College. And it saddens me that students attending orientation going forward won't get to hear Andy's description of human situation as Hogwarts, or hear him quote his mentor, Lence, about the student's mission in college. You are furnishing your mind, and you must furnish it commodiously. When you grow old and have conversations with yourself, you want those to be intelligent conversations. Don't worry, Andy. I, like the rest of us, will keep furnishing my mind, and I'll miss you dearly along the way.
Hi everyone, I'm Andrew Thomas. I'm also a class of 2010. It was during one of our many meetings at the Zantios on West Raven years ago that Andy confided in me that neither The Sound and the Fury nor Absalom were his favorite William Faulkner novels. It was only after many, many readings over the years that he decided that his favorite was Go Down Moses, a novel composed of 7 interrelated stories. Like most of Faulkner's work, it is a densely beautiful novel that offers, among other things, in-depth meditations on how individuals remember, re-narrate, and reinvent their pasts in light of present-day loss. The novel is lengthy, not just in page, but in content. Not just in page count, but in content. And I find it difficult to excerpt from Go Down Moses any one passage. That would do justice to our occasion today, just as I find it difficult to excerpt out of Andy's life a story that would fully reveal how much he meant to me over the years. The first Faulkner I ever read was with Andy and a small handful of honor students. Sitting in the Ted Estes Library, we pored over the opening short story of Go Down Moses, a story simply titled Was. Andy was always his most jocular in these moments, when earnest and somewhat befuddled students were further befuddled by opaque texts and his energetic, discursive, and often maddening mode of questioning. But those students who persevered with Andy, who were willing to parse and puzzle and read and reread, were met with an openness of heart and generosity of spirit I've since yet to encounter. When I first heard of Andy's death, it was Faulkner's opening dedication in Go Down Moses that first came to mind. In poetically terse prose, Faulkner dedicates his work to Caroline Barr, a singular figure in his youth. Of her, he writes, quote, "She gave to my family a fidelity without stint or calculation of recompense, and to my childhood an immeasurable devotion and love." And I imagine that many of us in this room can echo this sentiment, that Andy gave to the Honors family a fidelity without stint or calculation of recompense, and to many of us in our college years and beyond, an immeasurable amount of devotion and love. Whenever you met with Andy in his office, it was never with him alone. Adjacent to your chair was a large poster of a jaunty young Faulkner, arms crossed with a half-smoked cigarette dangling from his right hand. Like begets like, perhaps. Andy bought this poster from Square Books on his first trip to Oxford, Mississippi over 2 decades ago. In the summer of 2010, Andy organized an unofficial honors study away trip to retrace his tracks. 8 of us piled into 2 cars, copies of The Sound and the Fury in hand, and made the 11-hour drive to northern Mississippi. While we of course wandered the grounds of Faulkner's quintessentially Southern Gothic home, Roanoke spent hours browsing the finely curated stacks of Square Books, and ate fried catfish, hush puppies, and Texas caviar at Taylor Grocery. We also of course read and talked about Faulkner. We read The Sound and the Fury in preparation for the trip, and this reading imbued our travels with the oft-romanticized sense of place that many seek when they travel to Faulkner country. As a 22-year-old, I was in the full throes of sepia-tinted euphoria. This is perhaps why I will never forget Andy reading aloud one of his favorite passages from The Sound and the Fury on one of those warm summer evenings. From the well-known opening of the Quentin section, he read in a fast-clipped, soft Southern accent, quote, "When the shadow of the sash appeared on the curtain, it was between 7 and 8 o'clock, and then I was in time again, hearing the watch. It was grandfather's, and when father gave it to me, he said, 'I give you the mausoleum of all hope and desire.' It's rather excruciatingly apt that you will use it to gain the reductio absurdum of all human experience, which can fit your individual needs no better than it fitted his or his father's. I give it to you not that you may remember time, but that you might forget it now and then for a moment, and not spend all of your breath trying to conquer it. Because no battle is ever won," he said. "They are not even fought. The field only reveals to man his own folly and despair, and victory is an illusion of philosophers and fools." For someone as dedicated to the written word as Andy was, Faulkner was a gold mine. So remember that whole thing I said about sepia-tinted euphoria? Yeah, well, it hit me hard, and I underestimated its staying power. The following year after this trip, my partner and fellow honors alumnus, Sarah Gabler, and I both started in the graduate program at the University of Mississippi to study Faulkner in Southern literature, and we wouldn't have been there if it weren't for Andy's influence. In our time there, Andy visited us twice. It was during his first extended stay that I realized an actual friendship had replaced a teacher-student relationship. And it has only been with age that I've begun to realize that true friendships are anything but one-dimensional. Rather, they are complex, complicated, and conflicted. And while many here may have known him as Professor or Mr. Little, many of us also knew him as Andy. Any student of Faulkner knows that our attempts to remember and reconstruct the past are always going to be provisional, contingent, shot through with nostalgia, romance, and myth, and based on what we've forgotten as much as what we've remembered. I am under no illusion that Andy was a man without faults, and I don't intend to remember him that way. All of Faulkner's novels are about men and women riddled with the complexities and faults of being human, and part of the human situation is grappling with the narratives we communally construct and retell about those who came before us and left an indelible mark on our lives. As I reflect on Andy's life, I'm reminded of a scene in the 4th part of The Bear, the novella that makes up the core of Going Down Moses, and undeniably Andy's favorite section. In this, 2 men debate the veracity of the Bible. And the first man begins by saying, "So these men who transcribed his book for him were sometimes liars." And the other man, "Yes, because they were human men. They were trying to write down the heart's truth out of the heart's complexity, for all the complex and troubled hearts which would beat after them. What they were trying to tell, what he wanted said, was too simple. Those for whom they transcribed his words could not have believed them. It had to be expounded in the everyday terms which they were familiar with and could comprehend, not only those who listened, but those who told it too. Because if they who were that near to him, as to have been elected from among all who breathed and spoke language to transcribe and relay his words, could comprehend truth only through the complexity of passion and lust and hate and fear which drives the heart? What distance back to truth must they traverse, whom truth could only reach by word of mouth? On his second trip to Oxford, Andy brought a few more people with him. By a few, I mean about a dozen honor students. This group of rambunctious, smart, and funny students reminded me why the Honors College is such a unique college experience, and why perhaps Andy devoted so much of his time and energy to it. They were there in part to attend the week-long National Faulkner Conference and to hear my partner Sarah present a paper on Faulkner's magnum opus, Absalom, Absalom. It is with the scene from this novel that I conclude. In it, a woman, Judith, hands a scribbled note on a scrap of paper to another as she reflects on that which lasts, that which we leave behind after we're gone. Read it if you like, or don't read it if you like. Because you make so little impression, you see. You get born and you try this and you don't know why. Only you keep on trying it, and you were born at the same time with a lot of other people, all mixed up with them, like having to move your arms and legs with string. Only the same strings are hitched to all the other arms and legs, and the others are all trying. And they don't know why either, except that the strings are all in one another's way, like 5 or 6 people all trying to make a rug on the same loom. Only each one wants to weave his own pattern into the rug. And it can't matter, you know that. Or the ones that sat at the loom would have arranged things a little better, and yet it must matter. Because you keep on trying, and then all of a sudden, it's all over. And all you have left is a block of stone with scratches on it, provided there was someone to remember to have the marble scratched and set up, or had time to. And it rains on it, and then sun shines on it, and after a while, they don't even remember the name, and what the scratches were trying to tell, and it doesn't matter. And so maybe if you could go to someone, the stranger the better, and give them something, a scrap of paper, something, anything. It not to mean anything in itself, and them not even to read it or keep it, not even to bother to throw it away or destroy it. At least it would be something, just because it would have happened. Be remembered even if only from passing from one hand to another, one mind to another. And it would be at least a scratch, something that might make a mark on something that was, once, for the reason that it can die someday, while the block of stone can't be is, because it never can become was, because it can't ever die or perish.
Again, good afternoon. What a journey of the mind and heart hearing these stories and these passages that Andy loved from people that Andy loved. As a group and individually, we all have, during the program and the reception and the repast to come, like the singer of the Odyssey, encouraged memory to speak. But herein lies the challenge. Whose memory? Which memory? After all, we could have organized a marathon reading composed of passages taken from many, many more books and of reminiscences taken from the multifaceted book of Andy himself. For like Odysseus, he was a man of twists and turns. In hearing the tributes and the memories and the passages, and also while attending the funeral in the little Beginnings of Grace church near Livingston, it was very clear that Andy was many different things to many different people. Almost everyone has heard the South Asian proverb about the blind men and the elephant, but it's worth hearing again, I think, in the context of our celebration. So, a group of blind men have heard that a strange creature called elephant has come into the village. Out of curiosity, they say, we cannot see it, so let us inspect it and know it by touch. So they seek it out, and when they find it, they grope about it. The first person whose hand lands on the trunk says, this being is like a big snake. Another whose hand reaches its ear declares it a kind of fan. A third person, wrapping his arms around its legs, says, elephant is like a tree. The blind man who placed his hands against its side said, elephant is a wall. Another who felt its tail said, no, elephant is a rope. And the last, feeling its tusk, described the elephant as hard, smooth, and pointed, like a spear. Well, in 1989, a very strange creature called Little came into our village. Over the years, many knew him, as you've heard, as teacher, scholar, skeptic, philosopher, counselor, advisor. Here's an unusual one. When we roomed together in Denver for an NCHC conference, Andy founded a church and took me to Sunday Mass with him. Elephant goes to church. But seriously, for my reflection, I want to suggest that Andy was at heart a poet. Now, at first reaction to this notion, even my first reaction is that no, Andy was a philosopher, not a poet, a political theorist, and the two are at odds with each other, as Plato taught. Poetry is an imitation of an imitation, and thus even further from the truth than what passes for reality, which is already a shadow play in a cave. As such, poetry needs to be excluded from the Republic. But is a condemnation of poetry really what we learn from the dramatic structure and the many myths throughout the Platonic dialogues? Get it? Platonic. Just thought of that. And the Little style of teaching and advising, a style he learned from his master and mentor, Ross Lence, let us call it Socratic, criticize and condemn, or does it exemplify poetic modes of thinking and performing? Encouraged by the insights of Arlene Saxonhouse, the 2018 Lence Master Teacher, I'm going to vote exemplify, embody, and celebrate. Samuel Taylor Coleridge called our greatest playwright and poet myriad-minded, and certainly that epithet describes Andy. Like Shakespeare, Andy was a juxtaposer of contraries, an explorer rather than a settler, more Declaration of Independence than Constitution. He appreciated comedy and marveled at hilarity. Did you ever notice that when he taught, he was continually smiling at the wonder of it all? Drawing on Coleridge again, with whom he shared a number of characteristics, he was always seeking to make the strange familiar and the seemingly familiar very, very strange. And he was also like a not so ancient mariner, arresting us in the hallways and on the terraces of the Honors College, on our way to class or while just trying to get a cup of coffee in peace, pressing us to consider any number of, let us call them, little impossible questions. Surely there was a good bit of the poet in Little's mentor as well. Lence refused to say anything in a straightforward manner, but instead spoke in mysteries, sometimes literally in parables. Andy loved the story that Ross liked to tell about a disgruntled student who confronted him near the end of a final exam. Lence was writing the number of remaining minutes on the board, and as a young woman dropped off her exam, she said in disgust, You stood up here and talked the whole semester and never taught us a single thing. To which Lence replied, without turning around, and you, madam, are living proof of that. In the late 80s, though Lence was not yet formally part of the honors program, Dr. Estes was using him regularly to recruit new students at the twice-a-year honors banquet. Back in the 80s, this was a group of some 300 prospective students, parents, and siblings. For most of them, this dinner was their first introduction to the University of Houston. Somehow, Lence would weave a puzzling story into his recruiting talk. This time about a concerned student who accosted him after a class. Why are we wasting our time talking about ancient and medieval political thought? Don't you know the CIA is killing people in Argentina? To which the reasonable Mr. replied, I certainly hope so. That's what we're paying them for. Now, a lot of prospective students, not to say faculty, were mystified and confused. Some were made angry by this parable. But a quirky high school student from LaPorte must have been intrigued because he applied and was accepted by the honors program and enrolled at the University of Houston, and thus began one of the great student-teacher relationships of our time. Throughout his life, Little loved parables and riddles and strange ways of provocatively practicing the art of teaching. So while his discipline was political philosophy, and while he did not, to my knowledge, compose a single line of verse, I think he was more poet than philosopher. Socrates is famous for saying that the unexamined life is not worth living. But Little stood for corollary, that the unlived life isn't worth examining. Because no one could say that Andy Little lived an unfull life. No one would accuse him of the preoccupations associated with, say, analytic philosophy. Nor did he teach shielded by a cold intellect, but rather from a place at one with the passions of mind, body, and spirit. The only navel-gazing Andy maybe did was when he was trying out a new meat rub on himself before he tried it out on some steaks. Might happen. And of course there are the songs, and they are poems. Little may not have been a songwriter, but he was a one-man cover band. Many of us were fortunate to hear him karaoke, and no one did it with more passion. I remember traveling in 2009 with Andy, Tucker, Andrew Thomas, and the McDessies. There must have been some singing going on that night, maybe after the Turkish night celebration near Ephesus, because I said something like, Andy, your voice is so beautiful. You don't want to ruin it. Why don't you give up cigarettes? Well, that didn't happen. In fact, on a study abroad the following year, Tucker took up smoking, as he said, so Little wouldn't have to smoke by himself in Israel. In 2 weeks, Tucker got totally rehooked on nicotine. But I mean, what are good friends for after all? At any rate, Andy continued to sing despite the cigarettes, and damn, the boy could sing. It must have been about the same time, maybe 2011, when we gathered at Champs after the great conversation for the wind-down ritual after the big gala. That night there was a karaoke contest. Well, contest is probably not the right word, because the competition shouldn't have bothered. Andy won, of course, and there was a cash prize of $100, as I recall. Instead of pocketing the money, he used the C note to buy pores for his friends. By the end of the evening at Champs, it was just Andy, me, and Tucker, who kept having to go out for a smoke. The staff let us stay well after closing time. I figured Andy was a star, the likes of which they had never seen. And I remember one of them saying, "Don't forget to lock up on your way out." Andy was a singer of songs, and the way he performed a song was with much more pathos than logos, full of love and affirmation for the beauty of music, words, and people. He once wrote about the brothers Karamazov, a book he knew so well. Father Zosima tells Alyosha that mankind has discovered no greater morality than the Christian one, be theology what it may, and I think that non-judgmental love is down there at the bottom of everything. After all, he wrote, none are at home, any can be lost, and to think you are wholly at home is to lose being human. There is a crack in everything, as Leonard Cohen writes, but that's how the light gets in. I want to close by reading a poem by Tony Hoagland. Tony was a member of our creative writing faculty for many years and had a lot in common with Andy. He too was a provocateur, a rebel, and a humorist, and he too is a true loss for our campus and community. This is a poem for all of us as we remember and continue. It's called Distant Regard. If I knew I would be dead by this time next year, I believe I would spend the months from now till then writing thank you notes to strangers and acquaintances, telling them, you really were a great travel agent. Or, I never got the taste of your kisses out of my mouth. Or, watching you walk across the room was part of my destination. It would be the equivalent, I think, of leaving a chocolate wrapped in shiny foil on the pillow of a guest in a nice hotel. Hotel of Earth, where we resided for some years together, I start to say, before I realize it is a terrible cliche, and stop. And then go on, forgiving myself in a mere split second, because now that I'm dying, I just go forward like water, flowing around obstacles and second thoughts, not getting snagged, just continuing with my long list of thank yous. Which seems to naturally expand to include sunlight and wind, and the aspen trees which seethe and shimmer in the yard, as if grateful for being soaked last night by the beautiful irrigation system invented by an individual to whom I am quietly grateful. Outside it is autumn, the philosophical season, when cold air sharpens the intellect, the hills are red and copper in their shaggy majesty, the clouds blow overhead like governments in years. It took me a long time to understand the phrase, distant regard, but I am grateful for it now, and I am grateful for my heart that turned out to be good after all, and grateful for my mind, to which, in retrospect, I can see I have never been sufficiently kind.